value you're delivering through rapid product innovation should match the pricing that you're charging for your product. And in order to keep them in sync, you need to have the infrastructure to test different pricing scenarios on specific cohorts of customer. And that's not easy to do unless you have a very agile experimentation infrastructure.
Welcome to LaunchPod, the show from LogRocket, where we sit down with top product and digital leaders. Today, we're talking with Prittam Bagani, VP of Product at Chargebee, where they have insight into how over 10,000 customers are optimizing their pricing models. In this episode, we discuss how AI is forcing companies to rethink pricing and why usage, outcome, and agent-based models are the future, and how to build the necessary technical and product infrastructure to test pricing models in real time across millions of users. So here's our episode with Prittam Bagani. All right, Prittam, how are you today? I'm excited for this one because we are talking about something I think super timely. You have great background in, time at Chargebee there. You have 10,000 customers and insight into what they're doing pricing-wise in this world where the pricing is suddenly becoming a hot topic that is changing quickly. Welcome to the show. How you doing, man? And thanks for joining.
Hey, Jeff, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Yeah, like you were saying, I sit at the intersection of building our own AI product capabilities and kind of reimagining our own pricing strategy. At the same time, witnessing like over 10,000 customers experiment with their pricing strategies. I'm really excited to be here and to share this with the peer group.
It's an interesting time to be in pricing, right? Because I remember doing pricing exercises at past companies, and I always knew the pricing was important, but it always seemed a little bit like, how much is this really going to help? Doesn't it seem like we should just make a better product or focus on other things? But now, it's no longer just, do you do seat-based or do you do some kind of like capacity-based or something? There's so many options. And this is becoming massively important. Both, people are saying AI products are underpricing themselves. People are saying some other things are overpriced, or, you're going to find that you're getting innovated on if you're just using legacy pricing mechanisms because someone else is going to come out and scoop up your industry with a more innovative, kind of better focused on the customer pricing. So what are you seeing? Like, let's just dive right into it here. Why has this become so important suddenly? Like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, great question, Jeff. So, there are different types of pricing strategies that have been used by different industries for a long time. Like, for example, we've been using cell phones for a long time. And, initially we were used to paying by the number of minutes and the number of SMSs we sent, but then it became all you can eat type of plans. What's happening now is things are profoundly changing because of AI within the software industry. Everybody is aware of it, so I don't have to talk anything specific about it, because the underlying models are being used left, right, and center by many products. Those underlying models come with its own cost. And now, if you are providing product and services to your customer, you also have to start thinking about the cost that you are going to incur to provide them the service beyond the infrastructure that you are running your product on because of the foundational models. And that fundamentally changes the equation. So that's one big point. The second really big point is that because of the AI, people are starting to think about agent-based pricing models, right? There are products that are trying to replicate the entire persona. So you can see products like Cursor and others that are building agents for development. So now you're essentially replacing, or to a great extent, the activities that an engineer is supposed to do using an agent. So now you have to start thinking about like how to price and package that capability. And if you're pricing it as an agentic model, you're likely to tap into the budget that is 10 times bigger than your typical software budget. So just to give you an example, give you some examples of the pricing models. We have primarily three or four main pricing strategies that are, showing up a lot now. The first one is usage-based. So essentially, if you are using OpenAI and you're using their different models that they provide, depending on the questions that you ask, the number of tokens that you consume, that determines how much you're going to pay to OpenAI, right?
It seems like this is pretty akin to seat-based, with Salesforce, or analytics tools. You might be events-based, or, in our case, like session-based, but it's starting to get one little bit closer to, it's usage versus, just kind of seats or some one step removed. But it seems like the common thread across all these, and we'll get into other ones, is this concept of like, we've always known this was a better way to do it, right? Like how do you, in reality, the goal is always how do you charge as close to the value of what you deliver as possible, right? And am I missing something? This seems to be just like something we've always known is we want to move closer to that. And now just because the AI, some of these tools can do more and can do more of the complete workflow. They're not a tool that helps you be a little bit faster to workflow. They can do a lot of it. You can start to charge more for like what you would pay the human for that workflow. You can tap into that like personnel budget almost instead of just the software budget. Is that the right way to think about it?
That's one way of thinking about it. There are multiple models. So like usage based, for example, like we're talking about is one model. The other one is outcome based. So there are companies like Intercom, for example, who are now charging based on the resolutions that they're able to do for their, support products, right? Instead of just the number of conversations, they're charging based on resolution. So it's very outcome based. And then there are companies that are charging completely agent based. So like you would basically get a sales support agent, and instead of paying $60,000 to a person who's doing sales support, you would pay $10,000 for that agent that will, perform a part of the role of the support agent. So there are lots of interesting things that are happening, and it's really exciting time to be in the space, and AI is really changing everything, and it's making things really, really fast, and people have to adjust every day. There's something new that's happening in the space.
Well, the one thing that always kind of had me wondering is outcome based pricing, especially, right? Like it makes sense in that, again, back to it is in theory connected the most to ultimately what we're trying to get out of buying software, which is solving a problem. But there's kind of two pieces that I was always a little bit curious about. One, looking at, you have Intercom, like you said, with their Fin product, Decagon, you have ChargeFlow, which helps with like recovering payments and lost payments. Are these companies doing better as a result of this, or is it just it's better because they're going to get more customers? Like where does the value accrue from this kind of pricing model?
Yeah, I think it's very closely connected to the go-to-market models that will actually succeed. It's as simple as if you go to a customer and if you tell them that I guarantee you that, you're going to get X number of outcome or X amount of outcome from our product, and then we are going to only charge you based on outcome, that would become a much simpler sale as compared to like, hey, here's the product, you have to implement it. You have to pay us like for the platform, then you have to pay us for using the platform, and then there is a subscription fee on top of that, and so on and so forth. Obviously, the other model is much simpler for the buyer to make a decision, and that's why it has this disrupting power.
It kind of removes the risk, right?
It removes the risk for the buyer, and it's also like it elevates the amount of product value that you have to deliver, because you have to now quantify exactly the value that you'll be delivering to the customer. And it's also like harder to build products that can actually truly deliver that.
Right. So I guess if you're looking at it like in general, it's probably one of those things that if you can do that, you almost shouldn't worry like short term, is this going to accrue more value for you? It's more, can you use this to win more market because you are going to deliver a better outcome for the customer? Is it, you can over time move people into maybe higher average contract volumes because they'll pay more when they can tie it directly to outcomes. I am curious. So like the one thing I still continue to wonder about this is, I guess on outcome based one, if you're not delivering that and you kind of move to this, seems like a risk with it is if you move to it too hastily, you might find yourself without much revenue. Or if you have a kind of like wishy-washy outcome, is there best practice around like proving the outcome? How does that work where a customer goes, yep, this is what I want? Like, do people ever dispute these things?
Great question, Jeff. So, the way most companies are doing it, especially the ones that are introducing outcome-based pricing or agent-based pricing or usage-based pricing, it all starts with capturing the usage information, the granular events data that allow you to know exactly how the product is getting used. Then once you capture that data, you build value metrics on top of it. For example, let's say you're building a customer support product. So with the usage events, you will start capturing the number of conversations that the agent is having. But then you will go one step further and you will say like, it's not just the number of conversations that matter. It's also how many conversations are resulting into a support ticket getting resolved. So you then filter down the outcome, and that's called your value metric. And once you define the value metric, then you start charging based on the value metric. So this is the strategy, but even the best companies find it very hard to really like get it right. So for example, if you look at Cursor is a hugely popular AI based IDE.
Yeah.
And recently they introduced a new pricing model. They had a standard $20 subscription pricing for their pro plans, and that gave you a certain amount of, calls that you could make to like the paid underlying models. They changed their pricing, and now they had like a component of monthly subscription, but then also usage based.
Mhm.
And there was a huge backlash when they rolled out the pricing because overnight, some of the engineers using the product started seeing like very significant amount of
Yeah.
bills, like $500 and $400. So these are the types of risks that exist as you kind of embark upon the journey to change the pricing and packaging. So what the best strategies is by first like capturing detailed usage data and analyzing the patterns, then identifying the value metrics, price, and then introducing the SKU alongside your existing pricing in a controlled way through pricing experimentation. And only when you understand all the nuances, like, scaling it broadly.
It's funny because it's kind of flies in the face of, how typically new kind of software industries or verticals would work, where it used to be you introduce a new kind of tool set. It was just get usage. Don't worry about being perfect on pricing right away. Like get the right direction, and then really work on user experience and delivering a great product. And then, as you mature, perfect your pricing model. But it seems like a lot of the AI tools almost went into it with that mindset. And the problem they've run into is they were delivering so much value for so cheap. Like you said, Cursor, for instance, right? There's no way that $20 a month was a fair price for the value it was bringing, but people were used to it. And then you suddenly start to charge anywhere near what it's actually delivering. And it's just such a huge cognitive dissonance that people are shocked. I just had my finance meeting with our controller today going through budget stuff. And, he's like, and this is going to be this much every month, and this is going to be this much. And any variation, he's like, well, what happened here? And if you run into these outcome-based things, there's going to be a lot more conversations explaining to controllers what happened here and why this month did it fly up and all that kind of stuff.
That's also another thing that's worth highlighting, which is the agility that is needed, right? Like the market is moving so fast. If you think about like the Gen AI native products like Cursor, Lovable, and the others, they are evolving their product extremely rapidly. There's this tool that takes you back in time and gives you all the changes that happened to a public website. So I was looking at that and I saw like how many times OpenAI was making changes to their pricing page.
Yeah.
And they made over like 128 pricing changes just in like 1 year to their pricing page,
Wow.
changes to their pricing page. So it basically ties back to the point that you're making, that the value you're delivering through rapid product innovation should match the value or the pricing that you're charging for your product. And in order to keep them in sync, you need to have the infrastructure that allows you to test different pricing scenarios and run like specific, cohorts of experimentation on specific cohorts of customer and understand the nuances of pricing and valuing your product in the right way. And that's not easy to do unless you have a very agile experimentation infrastructure.
So on that, how do you do that? How do you kind of nail that out the gate where you're not, Cursor delivering, I don't know, $500 a month of value, if not more, for $20? But at the same time, you don't want to go the other way and come in, starting it. It might have been tougher for them to start though if they came in at $500 a month and couldn't get anyone to try it in the first place.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So it varies a lot, depending on the company and the type of business. But I think there is an absolute need of changing the mindset, the product mindset around pricing. So what used to be a loosely coupled function, in terms of being collaborative with the go-to-market team and, most of the decisions being made by the sales and the pricing team within the go-to-market function, it's changing from that to becoming almost a weekly exercise, right?
Yeah.
Gone are the days when you would price your product once a year or once every 6 months. That time is gone. The time now is to be able to run these pricing experiments almost like you run your sprints, because the value being delivered because of all the AI advancement is really rapid. And then also you have to adjust to the changes that are happening you know, all of a sudden DeepSeek comes up with their model. How do you respond as an OpenAI, right?
Yeah. I mean, who are already shipping pricing changes every 3 days. So, I mean, clearly they've done all right. If you want to maul yourself after someone, I would happily take even half the results OpenAI has had with growth. So,
Absolutely.
that's probably something to look at there. I realized one thing though around this is you brought up Cursor took a lot of flack when they substantively raised their prices. I guess at some level, it doesn't seem like they were hurt by it though. There were some people frustrated, but the great thing about having a product as good as that is I would wager most of those people maybe complained for a minute and then kept using it. Like it's almost we've seen this time and time again too, right? Like remember way back in the day, Netflix, they tried to bifurcate the things and then they brought it and they said, never mind, we're not gonna do that, brought it back together. And they took a lot of flack, people stayed with it because the streaming was a better service. And then ultimately, even like recently, they started to shut down account sharing and their business was not hurt by that. Everyone's predicting it's the end of Netflix, but because it was something people really loved and got, value out of, everyone complained about it and then they kept using it. Or Cursor, same thing. People got mad about that, but I don't think Cursor is exactly hurting for revenue right now. Like, does this kind of go back to, like you said, outcome-based pricing or this kind of high value, the closer you can get to value, people can complain, but if you're getting your pricing model right, they're going to complain and then keep using your product and keep paying you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, if you have a great product, if you're delivering the value, customers are going to be okay with, having some troubles here and there if but the key here is being able to provide the transparency. Well, in Cursor's case, I don't think users would mind paying them more because they're getting so much value. The problem happened when the expectation mismatch happened. You were paying $20 and all of a sudden the bill shows up with $500 and you were not communicated that it's getting changed. And that was the challenge, right? So being extremely transparent about pricing changes, providing estimates of what's going to happen to your pricing next month. If you look at AWS and other products that have been doing this usage-based model for some time, you are able to like set up thresholds and alerts on your usage, and you get alerts based on like, hey, you have hit 70% of your usage limit, right? And you're projected to hit this amount during this billing cycle. So those are some of the things that really matter in terms of providing a great customer experience.
Yeah. It seems like you're right. Communication is probably a big part of it. Just get ahead of it, warn people, make sure they don't accidentally find themselves expecting a $20 bill and getting a $500 bill. And then the other is make sure that, when you are raising prices, when prices are going to go up, it should be connected to something where people see, oh, that makes sense. I'm getting a lot of value on this lever. So I should pay more as that count goes up. That makes sense. I pay more for each of those because they're valuable. And, if you were to tie it to a non-consequential metric, you're probably going to get a lot more pushback and a lot less acceptance of price. To kind of think about that, like how, as a product person and someone who has seen, so much kind of across so many companies, how do companies do that right? Like, what do you need to do to make sure you're capturing the data and you have the insight, and if you're doing pricing experiments, that you're moving it along the right, you're using the right variables for that?
See, I think like the most important thing, I think if I would like to share that with my peer group, is a different mindset is needed on price. Pricing now is a lot more product thing than it
Yeah.
used to be. The reason for that is if you really want to adopt some of these modern pricing strategies, you have to really implement a great solution, technically a great solution. Because imagine if you are trying to do agent-based pricing or outcome-based pricing or usage-based pricing, the scale of events that you have to ingest easily goes into like billions. So, recently I've been working with a customer of ours. They have 50 million subscribers. It's an AI native company. Just to give you the complexity of how the
Yeah.
pricing works behind the scenes, they have 50 million subscribers. They have the ability to, in real time, track your usage. And if you're generating content using AI and you've just hit your threshold or your limit that is allowed for you in every month, they have the ability to in real time stop generation of that AI specific content, right? So imagine like capturing the billions of events for 50 million users and then in real time stopping the generation of the content, image, or whatever you're creating with AI and showing a paywall that says like, hey, you just hit the limit, either upgrade or like, buy additional credits, something like that. It's a very technically sophisticated problem.
Yeah.
So that's why it's becoming more of a product thing. And a mindset change is really essential. Like product getting more involved into pricing, building the right infrastructure to be able to capture the usage information, capture the events, and then building these types of real time experiences is a hard problem. And I'll give you a real world example. Another customer of ours, they started building this in house, and the technical complexity of it is so heavy that they started pouring resources into it. And the resources that were working on it are all back-end engineers. Okay, these engineers would be much better used if they are building their own product instead of working.
Right.
A suggestion for the audience or my peer group of product people here would be that don't underestimate the technical complexity of it. You might start small, but it gets really complicated really quickly. So I've
Yeah.
seen time and again people getting into it, getting overwhelmed by it, pouring like huge amount of resources in it, and then basically like still not being able to deliver the type of experiences that they should deliver.
And what is the opportunity cost of that, right? Because you have, like you said, you have a bunch of engineers working on this problem when they could be building your great AI product and moving you forward and allowing you to deliver more value. But also, I can tell you, like, if I'm in the middle of, creating a piece of content or, Lovable got, I think, dinged me twice for this real quick when I was building a bunch of stuff there, and you hit a usage threshold. It's really compelling if you're in the middle of something and it's like, oh, you hit this. And I knew I was coming up to because they communicated well, but I hit it and it was kind of like, all right, well, I guess I got to, whack my credit card again. And it was just is not a thought because I was prepped for it because they communicated it well. And then it hit and I was like, well, I'm in the middle of getting this. This is valuable and I'm almost there. But I went up, I think, twice in 1 month. I upgraded to get more credits there. This is before they had agentic pricing and everything like that. But I was happy with it. I didn't mind because I was getting value of creating the thing I needed there. But if they had, just shut me down for a day and asked me 2 days later, or had they maybe been like, oh, hey, you were over and you need to upgrade, I probably wouldn't capturing me right there in the moment in workflow when it was relevant was so powerful. And it would just made it a no-brainer to make that decision to pay more.
Absolutely. And there are so many examples of monetization throughout the customer life cycle.
Yeah.
And you really need a great product and the great infrastructure to actually be able to do that. That's a competitive differentiator. The other thing that I think would be really helpful for the peer group is to understand that the predictability of pricing is very important for the product and the business. So, like, for example, it's a real headache for the finance organization if we are not able to predict what the revenue is going to be for this quarter or this month, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what has also worked, and this is probably going to be the dominant model going forward for most companies, is what we call as hybrid model,
Yeah.
where you have a certain monthly subscription cost. Like, for example, Cursor charging $20 a month. But then when you go beyond the threshold usage limit, then you get charged based on like pay as you go based on the amount of excess usage that you do. This is a good strategy because it gives you the revenue predictability through the subscription that is stable every month.
Yeah.
And then you can figure out like what would be the additional revenue based on the unit economics. So it's really like an interesting way to bring predictability into your revenue stream also. So hybrid is likely going to be the model that most companies will adopt.
And it's great too, because as you make the product better and deliver more value, you're going to find people doing more in it or more willing to pay. There's, I would wager, a more direct correlation between we made the product better and we can charge more. Not even we can charge more, like you said, people are using it more and therefore paying that overage. So, ideally you can, it's always been a bit of a hassle maybe sometimes to justify, upgrading the product or making it better if you were already at a certain threshold of customer goodwill or customer outcomes or customer experience, because it was tough to kind of go in and raise price regularly and stuff like that. But in A, I guess people are more used to pricing flux now, and B, if it's usage based and people just start using it more, like it's already baked in. So you're incented to make the product even better, which I think is really great for, users potentially in the end too.
Yeah, that's true. But there are also like more complexities. So like so far, like what we have been discussing are use cases where we're talking about like a user using product, maybe like a consumer in a more like a B2C type of a setting. But then there are lots of customers that we work with who also have a fairly sophisticated sales led motion
Yeah.
where you are doing like multi-year contracts, right? Now, we recently onboarded a customer. They are in the infrastructure space.
Hmm.
They're extremely successful and, one of the marquee AI companies, and they're growing like crazy. Now, in their path to growth, they did a root cause analysis
Hmm.
and they wanted to understand like what are some of the things that will hold us back from scaling like extremely rapidly. And as you know, like some of these AI companies, they're growing like triple digits,
Oh
even,
yeah.
right? So the root cause analysis told them that the billing system was holding them back. And the reason for that was they were not just doing product led growth motion, they were also doing sales led motion.
Hmm.
Complexity was significant and a lot of manual work was happening. Like, people like salespeople were creating codes from the ERP system. A
Hmm.
lot of manual entry was happening, and you really have to start thinking about whether you have the right infrastructure to be able to move fast as you introduce not only new pricing models, but also new go to market strategies. You
Yeah.
might go from product led motion to sales led motion. You might go from sales led motion to marketplaces. You might sell your product through AWS or other marketplaces. And you have to start thinking about all of those go to market angles as you think about your pricing and packaging strategy.
It's interesting that this kind of brings forward, I feel like, a lot of things that were already known in pricing. It just, if they were good, it makes them better. And if they were pain points in pricing, it kind of exacerbates them potentially. Because, predictable pricing and enabling sales to move was something we knew you had to have, but you could kind of fake it. Like you said, you could kind of like price in the ERP. You could, especially for bigger things, you could, slow roll a little bit and go get custom pricing for every deal. But it was always better to have, well understood, structured pricing that just worked. But now this just like rips the band-aid off. You just can't do it that way anymore. You're far too slow. You're not agile enough. And it makes that just infinitely worse to try to do that. So it's kind of like in some ways forcing us to have better habits in some ways. One thing I'm curious about, have you seen though, to switch a little bit, is this can put more burden on the supplier as well when it comes to, you have to provide, like you said, there's costs around these models that are sometimes not that low, right? There's infrastructure costs. There's a lot of compute going on here and a lot of power behind these things. What have you seen for what companies can do when they're providing these tools to make sure that they're not going to run into a situation where they're providing, infrastructure and compute and really highly expensive things without recouping some of that?
So the unit economics are changing completely. That's basically what's happening. So imagine the situation, right? We're just talking a lot about Cursor here, but let's just talk about Cursor. So let's say that you're
Everyone
using,
knows it. It's a good example.
yeah, people know it, people like using it. So let's take an example of Cursor, right? I use Cursor, but I'm not like I'm not basically a startup founder who's cranking through Cursor like all day long. I use it when I need it, not a heavy user. I might be, and I'm paying like $20 a month, and I might be using like 10% of the usage limit that is offered. On the other hand, there could be like a startup founder who's, burning the midnight oil, cranking through Cursor, building like almost like entire modules of the product in a day. And they might be blowing past the limits that the Cursor has. So at a per user level, I am a much more profitable user for Cursor, right? And the other user is like basically a loss making user. So that's where unit economics gets really interesting, and you have to really understand the unit economics. And the only way to do that is to be able to capture the usage and then connect it with at the user level. And then based on that, figure out your pricing and packaging strategy. So it's still early innings, but at the end of the day, it all starts with capturing that data,
Yeah.
organizing your value metrics, understanding the unit economics, running very careful experiments with small cohorts of customers, and then rolling it out more broadly, and then being super agile, right? Like being
Yeah.
very agile, changing the mindset that pricing is like every sprint type of a thing rather than like a quarterly event. Because imagine, right, like the model prices are going down substantially,
Yeah.
right? Now, if the model prices go down by 50% and your product is mostly using the models to deliver the value, you would want to translate that, cost benefit to your users. One of the biggest problem for like these Gen AI companies is also a lot of retention issues. Like
Yeah.
people come join, they find another tool, they jump to a different tool. So you still want to make sure that the lifetime value of customers is significant, and pricing is a major lever to make sure that the lifetime value is significant as well. So you translate the savings back to the subscribers.
One thing I've noticed is a lot of what you talked about here around how to determine pricing and where the right things lie and how do you not lose your hat, but also how do you not price yourself out of the market are probably it's a more complex analysis than it used to be, but it's all based around the product and how you deliver it and how it works. Like, what are you seeing from a standpoint of, I think historically product is probably somewhat involved in pricing and it's company to company, but like, are you seeing more companies where product is more heavily or completely, much more in charge of pricing? Is that kind of moving that direction?
Yeah, definitely. We interact a lot with the chief technology officer, chief product
Yeah.
officer personas within our customer base. And
Mhm.
many of our customers are either rolling out, have already rolled out, or are experimenting with usage based models. And I'll give you an example of what we are doing internally within Chargebee. So I am collaborating very closely with our business technology team. So business technology team is the team that manages all the applications from CRM systems to ERP systems to accounting systems to billing systems and all the infrastructure that runs the company.
Mhm.
I'm deeply involved with and working very closely with them because we are also, as an organization, introducing SKUs that will be usage based and outcome based. So we are tracking the usage, we are identifying the value metric, we are running the experiments, we are using our own product to do that. So because of the technical nature of it, I was not this much involved, like let's say 1 year ago, but now I'm
Yeah.
heavily involved, meeting the business technology teams 2 times every week at that level. So I think most companies, and as I said, like, we interact a lot with CPOs and CTOs because when it comes to usage based pricing, either whether it is agentic model or whether it is outcome based model, it does require that technical persona to build the entire infrastructure that can actually run smoothly.
It really has become it's a much more strategic lever, like you said, but it's more to it too. If you want to be able to pivot, every 3 days, like OpenAI, you're going to need a much more sophisticated setup than if you just, can hard code pricing once every 2 years or once a year or something like that. You can kind of set it and forget it. But also the understanding of what, experimentation, driving tests, like you said, can you test a different pricing model on a small subset of your users? This almost starts to get into the world of, even like growth product people or growth teams of, it becomes a lever for, can that help you grow faster? Which is even one more step removed from that. So it's interesting to see where that world of pricing is going. I guess a topic I want to make sure we cover that kind of relates to this is, are you seeing, with your exposure to kind of all the number of companies through where you are at Chargebee, are you seeing that there are winners and losers here? Like, have you seen companies kind of get their lunch eaten from under them when they were slow here? Or have you seen conversely, maybe people, who weren't as successful suddenly rapidly ascend because they got this thing right? Like, how is that looking competitively as a disruption lever?
I think it's more than ever before, like pricing is becoming a strategic differentiator. That's
Yeah.
how I would put it. Any new company, when they're introducing a product, you know, there was a significant emphasis like in the prior years on getting the product right and then slowly getting the product market fit. But with the growth that some of these AI native companies are seeing, you're talking about like going from zero to 100 million in just a matter of 8 months, 10
Yeah.
months. Like
It's absurd.
we have been fortunate to be working with companies that have grown from like 2 million to 30 million in a year.
Mhm.
Like that type of growth, when that happens, you have to get a lot of things right. Okay.
Yeah.
You don't have the time. Like traditionally, you typically would take like a couple of years to get the product market fit right. Now you don't have the time. You have to get it right. So what we're also seeing is these companies are firing on all cylinders. So the companies that are really differentiating and are able to scale at that speed, they're firing on all cylinders from a pricing and go-to-market standpoint. So I'll give you an example, right? First of all, they'll have some very innovative pricing model, which is like absolutely no-brainer, either outcome-based or usage-based. So you can actually translate how you use the product directly to the value and then directly to
Yeah.
the amount of money you're paying. Then what we're also seeing is like customers typically would start like in the prior years, they would start with a PLG motion. Then once they get the PLG motion right, then they would introduce a like sales-led motion, right? That's what Chargebee did. Like we got the PLG motion right, and then we started moving up market and
Yeah.
then introducing more high-touch sales-led motion, right?
Same here. So
For you guys. So, but now if you look at some of these high-growth companies, they're introducing the product-led and sales-led motion at the same time.
yeah.
That exponentially increases the complexity of your billing system. So the example that I was giving to you, this high growth infrastructure company, the number one reason of blocker for their growth was billing because they introduced SLG motion and all of a sudden it became extremely complicated for them, right? So I think the companies that are doing it right, they understand the complexity associated with having multiple motions at the same time in a hyper growth mode and are able to move quickly, experiment, and change pricing in an agile way, but also in a very data driven way, like not just changing the pricing, because, we've all done pricing in the past and we know how it worked. Like we just come up with a price and then if it works, it works. Otherwise, we change it. Like that was the way things were happening for quite some time, like years, if you think about like a few years back. Now that's not the case. Like people are like the winners are extremely data driven. They're doing experiments. They know exactly what's going to happen, what will be the uptick in terms of revenue. They are very transparent in terms of pricing. So they really take it very seriously.
Yeah. Well, I love that taking pricing seriously has changed so much because I remember a day when, a pricing exercise was included probably a 6-figure engagement with some consulting firm that came in and you would spend 6 months, 9 months on a pricing engagement with this incredibly expensive consulting agency. And now the way that, these people, companies are making super data informed, really successful pricing choices, but they're, like you said, they're experimenting every couple of days. They're driving change, weekly, bi-weekly, like we said, OpenAI every 3 days on average, it seems like requires, and it seems like these companies are doing better. So it puts more power into your hands, but you have to do the work to understand it. You have to do the work to make sure you're delivering value. But the potential is just so high if you get this stuff right, where, if you can deliver the right moment, the right value, the right time to upgrade, you're going to have people just throwing money at you, but you have to do the work to
Yeah.
understand it. You can't offload that to some 6-figure consultant and, wait 9 months.
Again, I cannot tell you how many of our customers are asking us to be able to support even dynamic pricing.
Yeah.
Like imagine the pricing for you to be different than somebody else in your office using the same product. Like it's going to get to that level of understanding usage at the user level. The unit economics are changing, right? And the other thing is also like you have to really think from ground up. So
Yeah.
right from when you're building your product, right from creating the infrastructure to do the feature management and entitlements, like feature provisioning and entitlements, right from there, this whole monetization journey starts. So you have to first get the feature analytics, entitlements, and provisioning system right. Then you have to have the right way of setting up your infrastructure so you can capture these usage events, identify the value metrics, understand the unit economics. And then on top of that, you have to have this rapid fire experimentation capabilities. So you can make data driven decisions and it becomes like a bi-weekly thing and not like a 6-month or a yearly thing.
Yeah. I mean, so to kind of put it all together, it seems like the nice thing about these, right, a couple pricing models, you can do usage based, outcome based, agent based. In the end, they're all moving us closer to a pricing lever that more closely mirrors what is the actual thing you get value out of this product doing. And that's probably something companies should look at, or teams should look at, is like, how can we get as close as possible to this, ideal pricing lever, and that's more possible with AI now. But you have to, like you said, you have to be able to understand behavior better. You have to be able to understand the data and the events and what's driving it, so you can get the wedge in at the right time to pop it up. And the people who do that well are seeing this huge growth. If you can do it quickly and agilely and with the right data behind it, it can be this huge thing that turns retention into a huge growth lever. But you got to do the work to get there. And like you said, you have to be able to do it agilely. You have to be able to deliver the experience, and it can't be, slow. It can't be behind the eight ball. It can't be delayed. It's doing it quickly, doing it at the right time, and really having the right cause behind it. If you can do that, it's powerful, which is great because I think it brings home more value to users in the end, where you're going to pay more if you gain more value. And that's probably good for everyone. I mean, I could see a world, right, where like you said, your $20 a month to Cursor probably is a little bit over the value you're actually getting, and someone else is getting probably a major loss leader deal from them. In the future, we could move to a world where it's possible where, you're paying less, they're paying more, and everyone's super happy for what they're getting, which would be great. But there is also the piece of this where you have a job at Chargebee, and as much as I'm having fun nerding out with you about pricing, I can't steal you too long from them, because then I'll be getting too much value out of this exchange, and we'll have to find a way to get equilibrium there. So, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think this was really educational, really good to kind of take time to focus on how does pricing work in this new world? How should people be looking at it, understanding it? And I hope people learned a lot. I know I did. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. I really enjoyed coming here and talking about pricing. It's a topic that's very close to my heart, and I hope that the peer group watching this gets some value out of it. Happy to also help if somebody has questions and they want to reach out. I'm more than happy to be a sounding board and just discuss pricing related topics.
Nice. I was going to say, is LinkedIn the best place to reach out? I think that's where we met, actually.
Yeah, LinkedIn is perfectly fine.
Awesome. Yeah. So Prittam Bagani, VP of Product at Chargebee, thank you so much for coming on. Check him out. Hit him up. He's a good guy. I've had a lot of fun getting to talk to you, and I learned a lot. So I know others will too. If you learned a lot from the show, you're on YouTube, give it a like, give it a follow, subscribe. If you're on, I don't know what, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any of those things, subscribe to the show, please. Write us a review. It really helps us get the info out about this and helps get the word out. And if you like this content, help us make more of it. And that's how we're going to do it. So appreciate everyone listening. Prittam, thank you so much for coming on, man. This was a real joy. And let's stay in touch and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Jeff.